The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back to NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Today is Thursday, October 18th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us right now at NORML to help end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit norml.org to make your donation or join NORML today. Legalization won't happen without all of our support, so make sure you visit norml.org to get involved. We have another spectacular audio stash for you today. We're going to start off with daily news from California about the hemp farming bill out there. And speaking of hemp, we're going to talk with Ben Mazzell from Wisconsin. There's an event tonight at the Little White Schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin, to promote a modern hemp farming industry. So we'll talk with Ben about that event and a bit about hemp farming in general here today. Also in the program, more of our NORML 2007 conference audio. Today we're going to play a few of our short interviews. We conducted 22 interviews at the conference. Today we'll hear a member of NORML's board of directors, George Robacher. We'll also be able to check in with Alan St. Pierre, NORML's executive director, and Keith Strupp, NORML's founder, right there on the conference Saturday, talking about the events happening around it. Folks, we have hours and hours of content. We're going to be playing individual speeches and panels here on the Audio Stash and presenting all these interviews to you. We'll have the complete panels and speeches up on the NORML Events podcast. You can link up to that at norml.org/podcast. Those complete speeches and panels will be posted early next week. We'll let you know right here on the Audio Stash when they're available. Also, you have until midnight tonight to get your free conference poster. Send an email to freestuff@normlaudiostash.com. That's freestuff@normlaudiostash.com. We've got one signed conference poster. It's signed by NORML's founder, Keith Strupp. We're giving it away. You have to have your emails in by midnight tonight. We're going to have a new giveaway tomorrow, but this poster is just so cool. We've gotten about 100 entries so far. Send your emails to freestuff@normlaudiostash.com. That's freestuff@normlaudiostash.com to get your Keith Strupp signed NORML conference poster. We're giving one away today. And again, folks, we'll have lots of cool conference material, signed posters, signed t-shirts, books, all kinds of great stuff coming at you from the 2007 NORML conference, along with all of this incredible audio. Let's open up our stash today right now with our daily news. Our news today from Sacramento, California. California governor vetoes hemp pilot project. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger has vetoed bipartisan legislation that would have defined industrial hemp as an, quote, agricultural field crop, close quote, and established statewide regulations governing its cultivation by authorized farmers. As approved by the legislature, Assembly Bill 684 would have instituted a pilot program permitting farmers to cultivate hemp in 4 California counties: Imperial, Kings, Mendocino, and Yolo. Farmers would have been required by law to submit random samples of their plants to an authorized laboratory to assure that their crop did not contain THC potencies greater than 0.3%. Quote, Under federal law, all cannabis plants, regardless of variety or THC content, are simply considered to be marijuana, which is a federally regulated controlled substance, close quote. Governor Schwarzenegger said in his veto address. He speculated that farmers who failed to obtain federal permits to grow hemp could face federal prosecution, regardless of state law. It is the second year in a row that the governor has vetoed such legislation. Industrial hemp is currently grown commercially in Canada and the European Union for its fiber content. According to a 2005 Congressional Research Service or CRS report, the United States is the only developed nation that fails to cultivate the plant as an economic crop. For more information, please contact Dale Geringer, California NORML's coordinator, at area code 415-563-5858 or visit the website www.votehemp.org. Well, though Governor Schwarzenegger decided to veto the hemp farming bill in his state, there is a continuing effort across the nation in other states to begin growing this important crop. Tonight in Ripon, Wisconsin, there is a meeting to promote hemp farming in that state. Wisconsin was once the center of the American industrial hemp industry. Joining us to discuss the event tonight is longtime reform activist Ben Mizell. Ben, welcome here to the Audio Stash today.
Oh, thank you.
Great to speak with you today, Ben. Let's talk about this event taking place tonight. It's at the Little White Schoolhouse there in Ripon, and this was the birthplace of the GOP, the modern Republican Party, as I understand.
The Republican Party was formed in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. Their original document actually was to stop the spread of slavery. And the first meeting was held at the Little White Schoolhouse in Ripon by locals calling for a new party. There'd been an abolitionist party before, which was getting nowhere, and they decided to do a slightly more moderate platform of no slavery in the territories. So we picked this venue. Well, the area 70 years later was the growing center of America's hemp industry in the post-War I era. And a group of farmers and processors met on October 18th, 1917 to form a trade association, which they called the Wisconsin Hemp Order, which lasted for at least 6 years as the last records I found. Well, let's see, one of their big projects was designing a new truck for hauling hemp to the mill, because the trucks of those days were not capable of hauling a whole lot of material, even though they were built heavier, and since you were trying to move something light, they needed a new box on top so as to be able to move a lot of stuff, a lot of light stuff. In any case, so they had their first meeting 90 years ago and felt it would be a good time and place to revive the hemp order as a advocacy organization in Wisconsin, narrowly working on bringing this crop back. 10 miles south of Ripon in the town of Brandon was the last hemp mill licensed in the U.S. There were processors or growers there up through 1957, and then the mill lasted through 58, wrapping up the 57 crop, the Matt Renz Hemp Company. So we felt that was a good spot to hold an educational event, bringing in Dr. Dave West, a plant geneticist who had research license a few years ago to breed a strain in Hawaii that would be both low THC and grow tall enough to be a viable fiber crop. Essentially, he showed that it could be done, and since the federal government wasn't ready to issue actual production licenses, the funding ran out, since the people who'd paid for his research had been anticipating that they could actually start producing once he developed the strain.
Now let's talk about that hemp project in Hawaii, Ben. Unlike other state-authorized hemp farming programs, which have never gotten seeds into the ground, there was actually a small field of it growing in Hawaii.
Right. Dr. West was limited to a quarter acre. The DEA required, I think it was 14-foot fences and a lot of expensive security measures, and he wasn't allowed to market even the non-marijuana parts of the crop. So it was strictly a research operation. But he did grow for 4 years. I guess when he first worked with the Canadian low-THC strains in Hawaii's latitude, they went 18 inches tall and made seeds, which, if you're looking for seeds as a mark, as your product might work, but he had to go through some contortions to get them tall. But I think you probably have to talk to him for more detail on that.
Righto.
After the event, I'll know more.
Now, the event tonight in Ripon at the Little White Schoolhouse, this is to promote a new hemp industry in Wisconsin. Ben, is there already some legislation in place that would facilitate that there?
We've had bills in the state legislature. Had one in '03, which got a large majority vote in the Agriculture Committee, but never did reach the floor. Then this year, a somewhat narrower bill, which creates a blue ribbon commission to look at what industries the state would develop to use hemp once the feds stopped blocking production. And this bill got a unanimous vote in the Assembly's Rural Economic Development Committee late last spring. I'm told that the speakers promised us a floor vote whenever they finish our state budget, which has dragged on forever. But I'm thinking that it will pass. But it doesn't per se allow cultivation. It urges the federal government to start issuing licenses. We don't actually have to change our state law to license producers. The provisions from the late 50s, under which farmers paid $100 and got a license, are still on the books. But the state license doesn't let you grow without also having a federal license. Now, there's been some debate within the hemp side where one group has felt that we could set up a scheme, much like Canada has, where hemp could be licensed without changing the marijuana laws, and in theory this is correct. I'd always taken the position that until we broke through the marijuana stigma, we're not going to see that change, at least not at the legislative level. Some hope that might happen in the courts. Vote Hemp has got, and a couple South Dakota farmers are trying to force the DEA to issue a couple growers hemp licenses.
Now, we touched on the DEA licenses for hemp farmers. Ben, how are those obtained?
Well, first, Hawaii passed a bill both creating a licensing scheme from the state and authorizing the University of Hawaii to seek permits for a research station. I think it helped a lot that their sponsor was a Republican member of the legislature, as is one of the farmers in North Dakota who's seeking a license. And the DEA, since it helped that they weren't looking at actual production, but at a purely research station, it made it somewhat easier for the DEA to stomach, though reluctantly. They put Dave through all sorts of hoops. He was delayed beginning his process until he could get a 700-pound concrete encased safe installed in which to store his seed until it went into the ground. So, and that represented a little bit of a budge on their part in terms of giving him the license, but they restricted it enough to make sure that it didn't, it never became a commercial item or a large scale.
So when you
four state agriculture commissioners, I guess it was last winter, met with the DEA to discuss. It was framed as, if you ever were to start licensing hemp, what conditions would you want? And the fact that the DEA was willing to meet with them was a incremental step on their part, but it enabled the North Dakota legislature to craft their licensing regime in a way that would be hypothetically palatable if the DEA were to take the next step. I think at a lot of levels it's really, we'll see what happens with the next presidential election if that leads to any motion. Barack Obama voted for hemp bills in the Illinois State Senate on two occasions. I think it was 2000 and 2001.
It also seems, Ben, that state elected officials have had little problem discerning the difference between marijuana and hemp. This is a distinction that the federal authorities seem to be wholly ignorant of.
For reasons unclear to me, it's been a lot easier to get state legislators to stick their necks out than federal. I guess there's now 13 co-sponsors of Ron Paul's federal Industrial Hemp Farming Act. The others besides him are all Democrats.
Well, Ben, this has been a wonderful conversation here today. I really appreciate you taking time to join us, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Okay.
Ben Mizell is a longtime activist and reformer from Wisconsin. The event tonight is in Ripon, Wisconsin at the Little White Schoolhouse. We have links for more information on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
Coming up next for you today, we'll have a portion of our interviews from the 2007 NORML Conference. We're going to start off today with George Rohrabacher. George is on the NORML Board of Directors. You can hear him on stage at Seattle's HempFest and other events, and he is a passionate advocate for marijuana law reform. Here's our interview with George Rohrabacher. We're here with George Rohrabacher, cattle rancher and member of the NORML Board of Directors. George, it's great to meet you in person here at the conference. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
Well, and this has been a unique gathering. It really has been a who's who of marijuana law reform here from all of the groups concerned in it, brought together by NORML. This is a great effort and very poignant event here in Los Angeles right now.
Well, it's a time, we're getting closer and closer, at least all of us feel we are, getting closer and closer to a tipping point where this hope of marijuana legalization is going to be a reality nationwide, and the more that we work towards that, the more that we're really pressed to get all the groups, all the acronyms in this business, to work together.
I agree. Is it part of the arrest factor? I mean, almost 1 million arrests now, 830,000 in 2006. Seems like we're reaching a saturation point for this kind of thing.
Well, and when you look back, when I talk to people about it, I say, okay, remember when Nixon was president? 17 million people have been arrested since then. That's like every man, woman, and child in the state of Florida. Get your head around that. Mm-hmm. 826,000 last year. At some point, we are going to reach a saturation, and one of my guesses is, with an arrest rate this high, the 17 million people arrested since Nixon has to have touched virtually every American family at some level, and I mean that's one of the things that's pushed the poll numbers in our direction for medical marijuana. Somebody has an uncle, an aunt, grandma or whatnot that has used this successfully and hasn't gone crazy and robbed a corner convenience store. So the BS that the government puts out on this has just been neutralized by personal experience.
Righto.
Yeah. And this incarceration arrest thing is something that's so huge that it's becoming the personal experience of virtually every family in the country.
Indeed, it has. You also get to speak at things like HempFest. While this is a conference of a few hundred people, HempFest has 100,000 packed into Merle Edwards Park out there. So you've really been able to witness a large amount of sort of public empowerment in certain areas in your home state right there in Washington.
Well, and And Seattle is a very unique place. I mean, the first day at HempFest this last August was approximately 150,000 people, because there's no paid attendance, there's no actual record, but it's sort of like a little island of freedom that opens up for 2 days in Seattle. That when it's 4:20 and you're looking at the main stage from the audience, or you're looking at the audience from the main stage, something called the Seattle fog emanates from the group, and it's just, well, I live in the eastern part of the state where it's dry and we have wildfires. From a half a mile away, it looks like 40 acres burning. There's that much marijuana being smoked at 4:20 without anyone being arrested, without anyone getting punched in the face, and it's a great example that, yes, this can happen.
Righto. George, there was a piece I received from you. It was a spoken word piece about a patient named Jonathan Magby. And his experience was one that a lot of people in this movement do know about. And you wrote very eloquently about that. And first, I wanted to ask, being out in Washington State, first, how did you hear about this? And then, how did it affect you? Was it a turning point for you in activism?
Well, I actually heard about it in Washington, D.C. I had just flown to D.C. for a normal board meeting, which normally happened on Saturday. I arrived Friday afternoon, walked into the NORML office, and Alan, our executive director, slid across the desk that day's Washington Post, and there was an article about Jonathan Magby. And for those of your listeners that don't know about Jonathan, I believe he was a 27-year-old black male who had been injured and put in a wheelchair at age 4 or 5, I believe, hit by a drunk driver. Maybe he was 8 years old, but a little kid. And so he had spent over 20 years in a wheelchair, and he was arrested as a passenger in a car. He was searched, found a little marijuana on him, was pulled up before the magistrate in D.C., and didn't answer the questions the way the magistrate had wanted, and so she sentenced him to 10 days in jail. The jail said, hey, we can't take care of someone with the conditions like this. He needs a ventilator at night. And anyway, the judge said, you need 10 days in jail, sent Jonathan to jail. His mother spent about 4 days trying to get his ventilator into the jail through the red tape. And in the afternoon she got it through the red tape, Jonathan was ambulanced out the backside of the jail and died at the emergency room in the hospital. And I'm a father of 4 kids. Right now they're between 25 and 32 years old. I've got 3 sons. And when I read that article, it could have been one of my sons. And the idea that a judge could send a handicapped person to jail for 10 days for possessing 2 or 3 joints is so egregious and so unjust. It's hard to find something that bothers me more than that. And I guess it's because, I mean, if you want to define who I am, parent, dad, granddad, that's the top of the list, and husband right after that. And that his mother could have suffered the days of agony of trying to get the ventilator through the red tape to have the outcome, oh, your son is dead for a couple of joints. If that doesn't make you mad, you don't have a soul, or you haven't listened to the story. Anyway, it has pushed me more than anything that I've personally experienced in this meeting. And I only experienced it secondhand. I experienced it just like anybody else who bought the Washington Post that day. But, if we don't have the heart and soul to do something about that, we don't deserve to call ourselves Americans.
George, I really want to thank you for joining us here today, and I really appreciate you speaking with us.
Thank you very much.
That was George Rohbacher, a member of the NORML Board of Directors, interviewed there at the 2007 NORML Conference. That interview took place on Saturday. George is just a wonderful individual and, again, very, very passionate about marijuana law reform. Coming up next, we got a chance to check in with Alan St. Pierre, NORML's executive director, and Keith Strutt, NORML's founder, right in the middle of the conference on Saturday. Here's Alan and Keith talking about the conference on Saturday.
Alan, this has been a great conference. Everyone has come out to this. This is really a who's who of marijuana law reform.
Well, as often is the case when NORML stakes its flag in the ground, about 450 to 550 activists on the West Coast will often come out for this. It's been terrific. I think there's been a lot of unity, a lot of forward thinking, and I just can't imagine not putting this on again about a year today.
Most definitely. Has there anyone spoken here who you've perhaps never met before in person or spoken to over the phone or never see present that has kind of surprised you? And
yes, in fact, Nico from High Times gave an absolutely extraordinary discussion on how to grow your own medicine, and I think there could be no greater topic in California for people to know how to stay out of the so-called black market, how maybe necessarily not even to interface with cooperatives and stuff where they're paying $15 to $20 a gram to just grow their own medicine. He's very, very articulate, and I think everybody who attended that is going to do very well for themselves post the lecture.
Righto. Also, Keith, you were speaking on a panel today regarding initiatives out there, sort of representing MassCan out here at the NORML conference. MassCan just had their big event, so a lot of their members were still tied up following things up at the Boston Freedom Rally. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, it was an enjoyable panel, I thought, because on the first level we were covering all of the either municipal or statewide voter initiatives, just to bring people up to speed what the initiatives were being proposed in which states. Most of that, I don't think any of it's finalized yet. Frankly, they haven't had time to collect signatures, etc. There are a couple of states where there actually are some honest policy debates going on. Oregon is one and Massachusetts is another. And so part of our presentation, the movement is big enough and broad enough and diverse enough now that we can have policy disputes. It wasn't a personal thing at all. There was no bad faith suggested on anyone's part. Quite the contrary. Nonetheless, it's clear that because we didn't work a little more closely together, that some of those proposals weren't vetted through a few more experienced people who've been working on the issue for a few years, Massachusetts in particular. There were some mistakes made. There's some language that I think certainly wouldn't be there if they would have had the opportunity or would have taken the opportunity to vet it with other colleagues. So meetings like this are helpful because the time you spend FaceTime together, oftentimes you can build those relationships, and the next time maybe we won't make that mistake.
Righto. It really has been amazing. NORML brought together Ethan Nadelman, the director of the Drug Policy Alliance, Rob Campia of Marijuana Policy Project, Allison Holcomb of the ACLU. I mean, there really is a broad diversity of groups represented here, showing just how important the issue of marijuana is to social justice groups in general out there.
Oh, without question, and also, frankly, it has been NORML's strength is that for the last 37 years we focused only on marijuana policy, and we're not just a medical use group. In fact, primarily our position is we ought to legalize marijuana for all adults, and at that point it doesn't matter why you're using it, whether it's as a medicine, for religion, for recreation, because it enhances your sex life. It just doesn't matter. It should be none of the government's business. So NORML provides a big tent that facilitates that broader support, and we've always played that role. I don't think we've ever had a NORML conference where we didn't have leaders from several other drug law reform organizations playing key roles on the program, because in fact this is the major pro-marijuana event of the year.
Righto. It's also a big celebrity draw. Rick Steves was just wonderful, generous guy. Has been enjoying himself watching the panels as well here at the conference. And he's really unique because rather than creating very specific niches and terms, he does talk about broad recreational use, and he talks about broad recreational decriminalization. That is a unique celebrity voice out there doing that these days.
Rick is one of the most amazing advocates we've ever had the good fortune to even know, let alone have him jump in with both feet. He donates in kind regarding donations, probably $20,000 a year. He almost can't say no to any offer of help on our part, and we're happy to help him with his essays. He often writes essays, as he did for the Los Angeles Times, and often needs help with the footnotes and whatnot. So it's a great mutuality in the relationship, and anybody who's been watching PBS for 20 years, they really don't peg Rick as somebody who would necessarily be supportive of marijuana law reform, let alone a devotee. So he really, it's almost like culture jam is what he engages in, and it's just wonderful. He's one of the best spokesmen we've ever had.
Right now. I used to say that Willie Nelson was America's most beloved marijuana smoker because he was the only beloved marijuana smoker. The truth is, what I realized with Rick Steves, here's another one. He is so wholesome. America loves this man. He sells millions of books, and he tens of thousands of tours to Europe every year. And yet this issue is important enough that he will not be silenced on it. And I think Alan's right. I think he's our most effective advocate in the country right now. But it is interesting to think that he and Willie may be the only two out front marijuana smokers that people are willing to say, I may not like the fact they smoke, but I like those guys so much, I guess it's okay.
Another example of such is Bill Maher. I would say Bill Maher, probably more than any one person in America, because of his access to 6 to 8 Larry King appearances every year, his very popular HBO show, his comedy routine. He's also invited constantly onto The Tonight Show. He just has any venue he chooses, reaching tens of millions of people on a nightly basis. He, more than anybody, works the idea into the discussion that we should simply legalize marijuana for adults. And now the thing with Bill is that he's also polarizing for some folks. And unlike Willie and Rick, it's just hard to work up any negative feelings about those two men, whereas Bill can be a little polarizing.
And by the way, we should also mention briefly Tommy Chong.
Oh, indeed. I was going to say that next because his appearance last night, we know he's emceeing the Stony Awards tonight at the Knitting Factory, but he came out of the NORML Awards ceremony, which is really a very intimate time with the group at NORML, honoring a lot of people.
He's not being paid. He's doing this on his own nickel. He's doing it because he understands what happens to people when they get criminally prosecuted for this crap. He was prosecuted and sent to prison for, 9-10 months? He was in federal prison for selling bongs off the internet. Now, you must be kidding me. There are tens of thousands of sites you can buy bongs. You can go down the street to a real store and buy a bong. But they went after Tommy because Tommy was a comedian. They didn't like his politics. Well, Tommy is fighting back, and he now seems to like to come to the NORML conferences and speak. It's part of his pro bono work, and I think he always strikes a chord. People love listening to him.
Indeed, last night it was a wonderful talk. He was in a room full of great supporters, and knowing that as well. Yeah. And you spent some time with Tommy out at Hunter S. Thompson's ranch there in Aspen as well. We talked to him on the audio stash after that. That seemed to be a real turning point for him between his release and sort of where he is now at this conference.
Well, I think that's right, by the way. I understand that for Tommy, for a long time, I think he probably wanted to get away from the stupid stoner image. I think both Cheech and Chong kind of was like, hey, guys, can we do something other than that stereotype? And from our standpoint, it also wasn't terribly helpful. There are millions of Americans whose image of a marijuana smoker is stupid Cheech and Chong movies with 6-foot-long joints, driving down in a car. So I think they now recognize, certainly Tommy Chong recognizes now, that was a harmful thing. And so in his entertainment and when he comes and talks at NORML, but also when he does it commercially, he's raising consciousness now about the fact that there's something wrong with these damn laws, and it's time they were changed. So they made a mistake when they sent Tommy Chong to prison.
They sure did, because, and especially now that he's been involved with NORML, last year's conference was really the first time he came on board out there in Aspen, and he did a number of local events with Oregon NORML up there in the Northwest as well. But now he's here back at the NORML 2007 conference, and it seems to get better each time. He seems to have a great grasp of the information that NORML has, just, the information that NORML is putting out there about recent stuff, arrests, and things like that. He seems to really, keep up on it.
I can guarantee you that he's very active on his email, and he and I trade emails, and Alan trades emails, and so he does get most of the inside stuff. He's on our advisory board, so if there's a report or a news article or something that's particularly insightful, Alan Alan generally sends it around to the board and the advisory board. So after a period of time, they understand we're serious. Yeah, we like to get high, but the truth is we take a serious approach to legalizing marijuana, and I think they like that.
Righto.
The government made an activist out of Tommy Chong. That's simple. That's that simple.
Very much so. Well, Alan, Keith, I really appreciate you taking time to speak with us here today. It has been a wonderful conference. You have done an incredible job bringing all these people together. It really is the two of you who are able to reach out and contact all these people. So thank you.
That's simply because we know where all the bones and all that. We know where those are buried, so we can manipulate almost anybody to speak.
Alan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Keith.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks.
Alan St. Pierre, NORML's executive director, and Keith Strupp there on Saturday at the NORML conference. We're going to have lots more conference content for you this week and next week. And again, the individual speeches and panels will start to become available on the NORML Events podcast next week. Make sure you link up at norml.org/podcast. Everyone, thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. Listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normlaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow.
.6% of Americans no longer support arresting and jailing marijuana smokers, and nearly as many support the medical patients having access to medical marijuana. And over 80% of our citizens now believe the war on drugs is an ineffective failure. So the question is, when will the government's misguided war on adult marijuana smokers finally end? When? Simple. When you and your like-minded friends, family, and coworkers get involved with an organization such as the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, also known as NORML. My name is Keith Strupp, and I founded the organization in 1970. Contact us at NORML, toll-free, 888-67-NORML, or by visiting the organization's up-to-date webpage at www.norml.org.